welcome to another episode of Analytical Innovations presented by Analytical AI. I am your host, Dr. William Monroe. Today with me, we have Peter, and I'm going to butcher this, Inge?
Inge.
Yeah. Okay.
No
All right. Yeah. I go to the German pronunciation of it.
That's probably right. But
yeah, right is in the eye of the or ear of the beholder, I guess. And Will Blackburn, they together founded a company, DevClarity, which is an AI-based platform company that really seeks to support high-performance engineering software teams. And I'm going to let them explain more about that here in a minute. Peter has a financial background, graduating from UA and working in a variety of different places, but most recently as the CFO of Nextsoft. And that's where, is that where y'all met?
Yeah, that's
okay.
where we met.
All right. So that's where Will and Peter met, where Will, you were working as the CTO.
That's right.
At the time there at Nextsoft. And then once y'all exited Nextsoft, then DevClarity is the next big thing that y'all are onto, right?
That's
right.
it.
And then I know, Will, you've been heavily involved in the founding of Birmingham AI, and Peter also, I know you're very active in the group as well. And so Birmingham AI is a meetup group that we have here in town. I think we started, I remember coming to some of the early meetings and it was like 10 or 20 people, and now it's hard to fit 150 people into a room doing that. And I think that just speaks to the influence that you guys have and the vision that you have for AI applications and AI use for lots of different things. And so I think that's really neat as well. Both of y'all are high-powered individuals. I mean, if you take a look at these guys' LinkedIn, you're going to notice that they're getting a lot done. And so I'm really excited to have you guys on board. It's always fun to talk AI with different folks and different friends for sure. And so Peter and Will, y'all are here to share your insights. Specifically, I think one of the places that I've seen y'all talking a lot more about lately is AI assisted coding. But let's talk about that. But before we get to that, could you give a little bit better explanation as to what DevClarity is, what y'all's mission is, and what the goal is there?
Yeah. I can tell you a little bit about what we do, and then Peter, you can speak about the mission some. But really what we're focused on is helping software development teams accelerate their adoption of AI coding tools. Mm-hmm. I think every CTO out there today is getting asked by their CEO, hey, how are we using AI in software development?
Yep.
And they've got developers who are kind of doing scattered experiments with tools like Cursor or GitHub Copilot. And really what we do is we come in and we help create a standard approach for their team. And it helps them move in the same direction. And then it, like we said, it really accelerates that adoption of AI and just has them see both speed and quality increases within 30 days of engaging with us. So we have services and a platform that goes along with it to help that happen.
Yeah.
Peter, you can talk a little bit about our broader mission.
yeah, the mission's pretty simple. It's just drive high performance engineering teams.
Yeah.
And as you operate in the real world, you start to learn what that actually looks like. And so we have a combination of products and services like Will alluded to, but it's clear to us today that the number one ROI thing an engineering team can do is to make sure that their developers are fully enabled for AI coding. And so that's why that's where all of our focus is going right now.
Yeah. No, that's neat. And I imagine that you get probably the full gamut of responses to what you guys are trying to support, both from like wide open arms, hey, let's do this, to to somebody in the corner saying, no, that's not real AI. I'm not really interested in doing that. Not excited about that. So I guess on the two sides of that coin, there's the power of the tools and there's the the fear or the concern, probably rightly so in many cases, that go with the tools. So I'd be really interested in y'all's perspective on what's the real power of the tool, because we have what's out there in the public domain where people are saying, oh, it's going to do everything for you and you just have to sit at home playing Pokemon Go or whatever. And then you have the flip side where people are afraid to ask it to do anything. So what are the two sides of that coin that you guys see?
Yeah, we definitely get both sides of the equation there. I think really the way we like to think about this today is like, where is the technology at today? And then what are the workflows that your company already goes through that we can apply this technology today? So let's get out of the like abstract, the like 3 years from now, here's where we're going to be. And let's talk about how it can actually impact your team today. And so when we look at the technology that's out there, what teams are doing, an area that just becomes obvious to us to focus on is in writing code itself.
Yeah.
Writing code is, very text-based, language-based, and that's what these large language models are good at. They're good at processing a lot of these tokens, this code. They're good at writing it itself. And so that's an area we can focus on. And I think that whether you've got someone who is like super excited about this and thinks it's going to change everything, or you take someone who is scared of it or skeptical at the very least of it, and you say, hey, sit down with us for an hour, walk me through how you write code, how you understand a new code base you have to hop into, and then let me show you some of the new tools that are out there that can really change that process and help you spend your time doing what you care most about, which is solving a problem, creating a great product or application. Then it really serves both of those people. And it's been a cool thing to see how, when we take the abstract and make it real and change someone's day-to-day process, then that's when they start to get excited about using these tools.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Now, Peter, I know that you don't have a coding background,
Right.
But I've seen some of the things that you've posted where you've been able to do some pretty impressive things using AI assisted coding. So, from your perspective as somebody that doesn't have a background in coding, where do you feel that power of the tool value proposition comes in?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff here. I think the first point I want to make is a philosophical point, that it's a tool, and a tool is neither positive nor negative. It's neutral. It's the application of a given tool that's positive or negative.
Yep.
So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to ever be afraid of a tool. I think it's meant to be understood, and then you can figure out where to apply it well and when and where you don't need to apply it. So just want to make that broad
absolutely.
point. Yeah, it's super useful. Whether you know literally nothing about coding, whether you know a lot like Will, I would probably put myself in between, where my background's finance and investments and kind of like operations. But I was CFO of a software company that we built and sold, and I founded this software company, Will. So I have a super high level of context on software development without having actually written it. So for someone like me, it's been really helpful because I have the context, and this is the hard part. Like, context is what matters most with AI, honestly.
Yeah.
I have the context to generally know what questions to ask, and that gets you like 99% of the way there in my mind for using AI or any tool. And so for me, I knew what I wanted out of software, and I also had a very strong understanding, generally speaking, of what is possible to do with software. I just didn't know how to build it myself. AI can do the building part. Relatedly, one of the most underappreciated aspects of using AI, period, but we'll just say AI in coding, is that it's probably the best way to learn the actual thing itself. Now, like I said, I don't have a traditional background in coding, but you have an omniscient, ever-patient tutor that you can ask questions to. And so if you are diligent with your practice of asking questions and trying to learn and test things out, you can learn way more rapidly than if you
Yeah.
were just to go like read a book or whatever. You can build things live. And so I think it's super helpful for just learning fast. If you're someone who's curious and can ask questions. And then, yeah, like it's just continuing. Will and I talk about this a lot, and Will talks about it a lot in some of his presentations. It's just continuing down the path of abstraction away from machine language to human language.
Yep.
Like even modern coding languages is not actually what the computer can interpret.
Yeah.
So now we're just moving one step away to just, I can type it in English.
Yep.
And that's kind of like the last layer in my mind, maybe until like Neuralink happens and then you just think it. But so in that way, it's actually not that different. It's just the next layer of abstraction.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting because there's all sorts of applications. I think it's fairly well publicized that these models don't do math very well.
Right.
But I think they could probably write you a computer program
Yeah.
that would do the math for you.
Exactly. Yes.
And so I think
That's a good point.
it's really, really interesting. So I was talking with a family member. He wanted to make his own coffee creamer at home. And he was buying a jug of milk that wasn't quite a gallon. And so the measurements didn't convert like it wasn't a clean conversion
Yeah.
of just like doubling everything, right? From when you go from like a half gallon to a gallon. And so he put it into ChatGPT or something and said, hey, I need to go from a half gallon recipe to 3.67 7 quarts or something like that. And it was just wildly wrong. But I think that's where it comes right down to it. We actually already have plenty of computer programs which are great at that math.
It's a tool.
So it's weird that we're like chasing math as something we want these language models to do.
Right.
When realistically, I think what you guys are helping teams do is right in the sweet spot of let's translate what's in your brain into a language that the computer can understand.
Right. That's all it ever was, really.
Yeah. And I love that. And we think about that a lot. Like we just see so much misuse of AI. And, when you see a post on LinkedIn and it's someone complaining about how AI is stupid or, like it's always the case that they're misusing the tool or they just haven't provided enough context to it. And then like the collective, we haven't done a good enough job of like, from an awareness standpoint of teaching people what this tool is and how to use it the right way. And so that's like a big mission with Birmingham AI is to get the tool in front of more people, help them understand how to use it. Yeah. If you need to do math, don't use a large language model or at the very least have it write you some code that will do the math deterministically. And so like that's the challenge that we deal with some here. It's an education challenge first.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And now at this point, you've both mentioned context, which I think is something that probably isn't talked about enough. So tell me a little bit more about how you view context with these models.
Yeah, I can start there. The mental model I like to use here is, so when we hear about this AI, we call it generative AI. And the reason for that is because it generates tokens. So tokens, text, code, whatever. And that starts us off down this mindset around like, oh, I can ask it a question and then it's going to give me an answer. Or I can ask for code and it's going to give me an output. But it misses something that's really happening with these models, which is that the models is really trying to predict the output that it gives you. And so what we tell software developers is really change this mental model around, hey, I've got this tool that generates code for me, and change it and say, I've got this tool that I can use to predict some code for me. And so that little switch of mindset starts to show the relationship that the user has in terms of giving the AI the right context to predict what they want. So when I like see someone who's new to coding with AI versus what someone who has at this point, 2 years of experience coding with AI, The difference between what the person would write themselves and the output they get from AI, it's a massive difference with someone who's new to it or just not doing it well. And then the person who's figured it out, they're giving it so much context around the language that they're using, around the naming conventions that they're using, around the decision-making process that goes on in their own head, that they're predicting code that looks like the code they would write themselves. And so it all comes back to context.
I mean, what you're talking about makes me think of like Olympic sharpshooters or archery, you know, or golf or anything like that, where, you know, I'm an awful golfer. I like to say I get my money's worth out of it because I get as many points as I can. So there's a big difference between me, if you got me out on a golf course, and my thought process is I hit the ball over there. And it sounds like that's what a novice user of AI tends to do. I can just say, hey, I want code that does X, Y, Z. And they're not thinking about all of the additional variables that they're not nailing down.
Yeah.
And so in the same way that a pro golfer would take note of which direction the wind's coming from and, you know, what they want to land the golf ball on, I, as a novice, don't take note of any of that, and I just hit the ball and hope it goes far that way. A pro golfer is going to notice, hey, the wind's blowing this way, so I might need to compensate just a touch, and I'd really like to land on that part because then it's an easy shot over there. And so they're constraining the problem of where they want the ball to go in the same way that it sounds like a pro AI coder, a lot of it comes down to constraining the problem that you're asking the AI to help you solve.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy, but I don't want to make it sound like too hard for people.
Sure.
Like it's not that hard for people to like think about the process that goes on in their own head. And like, oh, like I just wrote this block of code. Why did I write it that way? Why did I name things the way I named them? Why did I not use a different design pattern? It's just stuff that's in our head. And then we expect AI to know it right away. Another like analogy we use is, you know, using an AI tool is a lot like hiring a new intern to come in and work with you. But the catch is that the temp agency that you've contracted with sends you a new intern every day. Like, how frustrating would it be to train somebody up every single day on what you care about? And what your naming conventions are inside your company, what this means inside your industry. And there's the right way to bake the context into the systems and tools that you're using so that you don't lose the intern at the end of every day. You start a new conversation and they have the same context and they're able to, again, give you great output and get you closer to the prediction that you wanted to have.
Yeah. So all right. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That the role that context plays is really getting all of those things that are in your head that maybe you take for granted out on the paper so that what you see when you get your results is a lot more of what you expect. That makes a lot of sense. On the other side, you know, in the work that we do at Analytical AI, there's a lot of IP concerns. I imagine that you deal with a lot of companies that have IP concerns, for better or worse. Are the tools that you guys are helping folks use, do you tend to get people using online tools? Is there any concern about the code that you're writing getting sucked into somebody else's cloud and then stolen by Microsoft or, you know, whatever the boogeyman in the closet is these days?
You want to take it, Eric?
I'll take the first part and then you can continue. Like, I definitely think there is some concern, but then I think it's relatively quickly alleviated for a couple of things. One, Will makes a point, which is a good one, which is these companies have a massive incentive to do things the right way. Because, I mean, OpenAI is on its way to being like one of the most valuable companies in the entire world, right? It's a couple years old. If they're like secretly siphoning off code from everyone, it would destroy their business, and they don't need that. So there's just like a practical incentive-based approach, which is all these players have an incentive to make these tools practically usable. And the way that happens is that you're not stealing people's information. But then they also have a lot of actual certifications at this point. Like Windsurf is one of the Windsurf and Cursor are kind of like the two most popular AI coding tools, like AI code editors. And Windsurf is like FedRAMP certified, meaning like governmental entities use them. They've got stats around like some crazy percentage, like greater than 50% of Fortune 500 companies are using them. So it's at this point, like adoption of companies has been very fast to where like I'm not concerned about security. Granted, your space is very sensitive, so that could be a little different. But adoption from companies has been pretty fast. The part that we help with is that while companies might have people that are using these tools, they're not using them systematically internally, and so just the output's not nearly as good as it could be. But I am mindful of security, especially when we're dealing with enterprises, but I'm not that concerned about it.
Yeah, and I think like the other thing I would just say is I was talking to a engineer at a large financial institution this weekend, and he was telling me that their company is not allowing any of these tools. And so what is he doing? Well, he's going around the system. And so like that's happening. If you are not allowing your developers to use these tools and you're asking them to act like it's not happening, then they're going to find a way around the system, or a lot of the good ones are going to leave. And so that doesn't answer your question, but it's a reality to the leaders today, in that, hey, you should come up with a solution that you're happy with, but that gives these tools to the engineers that need it and want it.
Well, so from my perspective, being heavily in the security domain, where it would be at this point a pretty big faux pas to take something off of our GitLab, put it on ChatGPT and say, fix my code. That would be problematic from where I sit. I also know that I'm probably going to Google a lot of syntax for that same code.
Right.
So my thought process is, and you can tell me how you feel about this, if I'm putting something in there that really would just constitute a few Google searches that I would normally put in to Stack Overflow to try to find the right syntax for different things, like there's really very little harm in that from an IP perspective, because rather than having it write an application, I'm probably having it write functions. It's still speeding me up a ton because I'm not having to go to 20 different Stack Overflow links to remember how the proper formatting for a print statement, or the proper formatting for whatever it is that I'm doing. But then essentially from a highly risk averse standpoint, I get to say, I'm really not putting anything out there. I'm not asking a question that anybody else couldn't ask.
Yeah. And there, in addition to that, there are tools now where you can get, if you're big enough and willing to spend the money, like a single tenant environment stood up where it's just your infrastructure, and the model's running just inside of your environment. And so there's options like that out there too. But I will say the companies that we're serving, again, the work that these AI companies have done is good enough and is checking the boxes to where they're able to use these services.
Well, and I feel like the coding tools and the coding knowledge of these models that are online are getting so much better, faster. There's almost a disservice to trying to set up something that's offline, unless at some point it just kind of plateaus.
Right.
But I mean, there's certainly questions that I want to ask the coding tools to do, which is non-trivial, but it's also something that anybody could do. Like we build image-based AI models. If I ask ChatGPT to make me a classifier to determine whether or not something is in class A or class B, that's fair game. I mean, that's a pretty straightforward Google search. to do, and that's why I've at least landed on my compromise of doing it that way. But yeah, I mean, that makes sense that the companies that are providing these tools have to provide a lot more security these days. So
Yep.
Yeah, and like, this might be a little bit of a hot take, but like, the role of software-related IP is declining in some way. Your space very well may be different. Like when you're getting to like some security type stuff or real like research grants, government stuff, it could be a bit different. But like what I'm getting at is, a non-technical, I do not have a software development background, right? I can replicate a platform that looks like Airbnb with a few clicks, just as an example, right? And that's just like a random example, and listener might be like, well, my company's nothing like Airbnb, that's easy. My point is, the competitive advantage that you think your company has is probably not the software itself.
Oh, yeah.
For you, it actually might be. I don't know. But for the average SaaS company, it's not. And so like, to deprive yourself of a tool that can like multiply, like literally multiples your productivity, is overstating the role of your IP probably. And I realize that might be a bit of a hot take, but I think that's reality.
Yeah, I think we should like double click on that, because somebody might listen to that and be like, oh, Peter can't make Airbnb. And like, but his point is that it's like the source code is not that important.
Yeah.
It's the data, and it's the network
branding
effect.
and
It's the branding.
yeah.
It's the people, and it's all of that at this point. And it's like, that stuff is becoming massively more valuable than your source code. And so as we get into a world where it's easier to write code and it's faster than ever, you can put out a bunch of tokens. What matters is all of those things more than the source code directly. So I think it's a good point.
Essentially, it's commoditizing the software development piece. So then that whatever it is that's your true product is abstracted from the software.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at double vacuum insulated steel bottles, like your Hydro Flask, right? Yeti had such a huge market share early on, not because their technology was better than anybody else. Their marketing was better than anybody else. And what they were selling was not a bottle, but kind of a lifestyle that went with that. Same thing with the Stanley tumblers that have become a fad more recently, right? It has very little to do with the actual water bottle. Is it an attractive form factor? Sure. But for the longest time, Stanley was the thermos that our granddad had coffee in, when we would go fishing or whatever, right? And so kind of to your point, software development becomes more of a commodity when anyone can do it. And certainly there's going to be people that continue to do it better because they're better at using the tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's not just about like faster at that point, but it's like, all right, in software, like what matters? Like what makes something viral? What helps a brand? Is it the knowledge about the space and just like delivering the solution to the problem really well? Or is it removing all the friction, like pointing the AI there to help? And so moving fast is important, but it's all of the other pieces too that will play into this.
Well, and it also probably comes back down to the processes that you're building out with the software as well, because those are really abstract from the software itself.
Yeah, and really it just gets back. All it really gets down to is the problem you're solving. Like my background's investing, so I very much think in terms of like competitive landscapes and moats and things like that. The barriers to entry in software are lowering, right? Yeah. And so all that ever mattered was solving a problem for people, but there were barriers to entry, meaning it was hard to create software for certain problems. And so that, someone could come in, build software, and one of their competitive advantages is that to replicate this would take a lot of time and effort. That is decreasing. So there is more of a focus on solving the problem itself and then distribution, i.e. letting the world know that you solve said problem. So really it's like a purer form in some way. Like at the end of the day, I don't think people care about products. They just care, do you solve their problem? And if you solve their problem well, then they'll be happy. And so I think this is like a further continuation down that direction. And it plays to the point from earlier around context, which is the hardest part, even pre-AI, and you can go back, in time much further. The hardest part is not doing the job itself. And this could apply to a lot of jobs, but we'll just use software development. The hardest part truly is knowing what to do. And so the doing the job itself part is becoming much easier, meaning like just, let's say I'm just trying to create a simple application. I can do that much easier with AI. The part that's still important is knowing what problem to solve and how to solve it and how to communicate it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I saw, I liken the AI movement to the development of the drum machine, and people thought that we were not going to need drummers anymore. It's like, well, who does a really good job at programming drum machines? Drummers do.
Yeah.
And then I saw something that somebody posted on a social media somewhere where they're like, yeah, everybody thinks that AI is going to do away with graphic designers. One problem with that is you still have to know what good graphic design looks like in order to get good graphic design out of the tools.
Right.
And so I think the same thing goes for software. You got to know what good software looks like in order to get good software out of the tools. So I think it kind of comes back to that for sure.
And it starts to push you in a direction that we talk about, I think, of being a little bit more business minded. Like I think business people, just using broad buckets, need to get more technical, and technical people need to get more business minded.
Yeah.
Because like what you're really saying is like, how do you know what good software is? Well, that's a subjective thing, but if you try to like break that down, like good software is something that solves someone's problem.
Yeah.
And so it's all about getting closer to the problem itself. And so when the challenge is less about writing like the program itself, it becomes more about how do I understand the problem. And so I think there's going to be a shift in the role of software developers where you're either going to have to be like a technical wizard, like the far end of the bell curve, doing things that like 99% of people just literally can't do, or you're going to have to be someone who is technically savvy and knows how to use these tools and orchestrate AI agents and things like that, but also has an understanding of the true problem, the business context you're trying to solve, which I don't think was necessarily true in the past.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. All right, guys, I think I promised 15 minutes. I think we've gone well past that, and I know that we could talk for a lot longer. So we're gonna have to do a part 2 at some point. But thank you all so much for coming on the podcast. This has been a really fun conversation. I'm really more of a novice on the AI coding thing, so it's been cool to hear y'all's perspective and get more of that for sure. What is the best way for people to engage with DevClarity and with y'all? Is LinkedIn the best place to go?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great place to find both of us. So you can find us and follow us. And then also you can go to devclarity.ai to learn about what we do. And maybe as like a last thing to say there, and related to Peter's like last point, is that we see like 3 different ways that companies are starting to adopt AI assisted coding. We see a company that takes off fast because they give their developers all the tooling and they say, go to work. I expect you to be 10 times faster now, and move a lot of tickets across the board. And back to what Peter just said is like, you've got to be a good software developer to use these tools well, so that you don't end up in a situation where you slow yourself down later. So these companies take off fast, and then as they've just added a lot of AI slop or bloat to their code base, then the velocity starts to decrease after that. We see other companies who are, hey, like, we're going to check in on this every few months. We're going to see where this is at. But they don't like make an investment into it, and they're just kind of playing the waiting game. And that was a good approach 2 years ago, but now it's time to really learn how to use these tools. And what we want to enable is the third type of company that takes off fast and then keeps that slope going up, where they just continue to increase their velocity or maintain a new higher velocity that they've established with AI coding tools. And to do that, you've got to adopt it well. You've got to use the right tools. You got to give it the right context. And then the developers need to have the mindset change around, okay, now I'm not only writing code, but I'm controlling this system of AI to write code for me. So how do I get it to write code like I would write code? And when you do those things correctly, that's what increases your velocity and then keeps it there.
Yeah, cool. Hey, that's a great point to end on. So thank you, Peter and Will, for joining us on Analytical Innovations. Go follow Peter and Will on LinkedIn. We'll tag them in the show notes. And yeah, until next time, like, subscribe, whatever it is that you do on the platform it is that you're hearing this on. And yeah, hopefully we'll have another conversation sometime soon. So thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, William.
Thank you.